That makes it even more special. We're joined by Sam Kahn, back-to-back days. Special week for us as Sam joins us again on day number 4 of the SEC Media Days. So we just had Zach Barnett on, Sam, and he said after 4 days that he's almost numb to I guess he might have used the word propaganda, but the patting of the back of the SEC. Have you felt that at all?
No, because I was smart enough to only come here for day 3 and 4.
Yeah,
I am a veteran, buddy. I'm not doing the marathon for 4 days. That is too long to be a media day. You guys have done Big 12, which has always been 2.
Right.
And that is the right amount of time. We do not need more than 2 days. And of course, I mostly cover the Texas schools.
Right.
So I was able to strategically plan my week to go just for Wednesday and Thursday for Texas A&M, and also because I am heading down this weekend to the San Antonio for the Texas High School Coach Association convention. So I didn't want to spend 4 days at SEC Media Days and then go spend 3-4 more days in San Antonio. I would rather maximize my time at the convention and minimize my time in SEC Media Days. So but yes, you do get a little bit numb to the talking points and the same old cliches and this, that, and the other. And that's part of what comes with media days is everybody's undefeated. Everybody's happy about their team. And there's all these narratives that take off and all that stuff. But I would say it's been a fairly uneventful week. There hasn't been a ton of news or buzzy stuff to come out of here, so to speak. I think there's been a few clips here and there, but it doesn't have the gravitas that I'm used to having. You know, when Lane Kiffin was cracking jokes all the time, Lane was a little bit muted this week because, you know, of course, he's coming off the death of his father, Monty Kiffin, and that I know it's a very emotional time for him. You know, Nick Saban is here, but he's no longer a coach, and so there's just not as much color, so to speak, I think, coming out of here this week.
Sam, A&M is there today. Arkansas is there today. One of the interesting things I heard from Sam Pittman was, and I totally agree with this, that rivalry should go back to home and home. It's been at AT&T Stadium, I'm pretty sure, since A&M got into the league. Do you think that they would both support that, or does Jerry Jones hold too much sway over that?
Yes, it will go back to home and home. Like that, I don't even think there's a question about it. I know Jerry likes having it there, and I know there's some Arkansas contingent that appreciates the chance to play in the state of Texas on an annual basis because of that. But now that Texas is in the SEC, along with A&M, I think it's easier for it to go away. A&M has certainly expressed a desire to not continue it at Jerry World and just go back to home and home. And talking to the coaches and people involved, it sounds to me like this is going to be the last year. This is the last year of the contract. This is going to be the last year at AT&T, and then starting in 2025, they're going to go back to home and homes for Arkansas and A&M. And I think both programs are more than happy with that. And Arkansas too, because Arkansas does not just have that neutral site game. They also have that game at War Memorial every year in Little Rock. So sometimes they're a little bit low on home game inventory in Fayetteville. So not getting that game back at home every other year, I think, is also going to be good for the Hogs.
Sam, Mike Elko has been on the job for a few months now, but his first SEC Media Days, just what was sort of like the presence and the feel like around the A&M contingent, because it is a new era and a weird new era where now Oklahoma and Texas are back at Media Days with them, so I'm sure that was a huge talking point. But what were just sort of the vibes you got from Mike Elko in this first go-around?
Very, very understated, and I think that's by design. He doesn't really want to make a lot of noise, and you know, we asked him this morning about just what his off season. I asked him, I said, "What did you get done this off season? You know, that excites you the most?" And he said, "It's been a really quiet off season. That's what I'm most proud of." And that's not usually the answer when you ask a coach about what's been going on in the off season. They're usually talking about, well, we got our team in shape, or we got some leadership, or we got some bonding. No, Mike Elko says we had a really quiet off season, and that's what I'm most proud of. And I think that's on purpose. I think he wants them to just kind of lay low, just not people not talk about them because they've been talked about enough in the past few years. And he said it. He goes, "Look, you can't talk about who you think you are. We were a 12 and 13 football team the last 2 years, and so the only way to fix that is to go to work." And so I think that's his message, and I think that the players kind of carry that today. But obviously, there are a lot of questions about Texas, certainly about the rivalry. Texas got a lot of questions about Texas A&M yesterday, and A&M got a lot of questions about Texas. It was interesting to hear the different takes. And I asked some of those players about that because I'm curious. These players aren't old enough to have played in this game.
Right.
You know, that rivalry was played 13 years ago. So Shamar Turner, who was here today, and Trey Zune and all these other guys, they haven't played in the rivalry. So I want to know how much do they care about it. And it was interesting to hear. I think, Trey Zune grew up in a family of Aggies, so he very much is excited about it. Shamar Turner, but yeah, I asked Shamar Turner, who comes from DeSoto, and he's like, yeah, I know about it, but I didn't watch it when I was a kid. I was a little bit too young to watch it back then because he probably was 8 or 9 years old, so I don't even know if he's even seen a game between Texas and Texas A&M. So that's what a fascinating thing to me is that even though there's relationships and people across the rivalry that have played each other, this is really going to be a new experience for everybody because it's been so long since it's been played.
Yeah, I get that feeling. I even heard one of the players talk about how his father brought up the memories of the rivalry. That's how long it's been since a lot of these young...
Quentin Ewers said that his dad told him that the
There you
A&M
go.
rivalry was more heated than the Oklahoma rivalry.
Yeah, that's how long ago it's been. It's been, what, since 2011 or 12? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
2011, yeah.
That's a long, long time ago. I'm glad it's back, and good for them. Do you feel like A&M being under the radar, like Elko said? It's almost like they have been so hyped since Jimbo was hired. Do you feel like that in the end is going to, that's what they needed? They still are recruiting well. They're doing pretty darn well when it comes to recruiting, but they just needed some semblance of normalcy.
Yes, 100%. I think that's exactly what they need because let's think about why in the last 2 years while they've been 12 and 13. We talked about them because of their number one recruiting class, which is a great accomplishment, but it doesn't mean anything on the field until they actually play and perform. We talked about Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban sparring about that recruiting class and about NIL at their press conference. We talked about Jimbo Fisher's guaranteed contract. We talked about Jimbo Fisher's lack of success on offense and the reluctance to give up the reins on offense, which, of course, even though he hired Bobby Petrino last year, he still really didn't give up the reins because Bobby was essentially calling his offense. So these are all the talking points about Texas A&M. None of those things I just listed are play on the field because guess what? The play on the field wasn't very good. They were 12 and 13 in 2 years. And they, despite the fact that they had one of the 10 most talented rosters in the country. And I look at that roster and I think to myself, that is a team that should be in the conference title contention. They should be in the race to win an SEC title, or should have been last year. They went into preseason in the top 10, I think, for a couple of years there, just because of their success. So I mean their recruiting talent. So yeah, let's just shut up and let's just let them do their work and let's see what happens after that. I think that is the perfect approach, and that is what is needed in A&M because I think there is a degree, and you guys haven't been around this state a long time and follow college football. I think you can recognize A&M and A&M fans want to win so badly that you're almost trying to speak it into existence. And I think that's Mike Elko's thing is like, you know what, let's stop talking about it. Let's just make it happen. And I think the way he's brought some accountability, some discipline. We were talking to some of the players today about how much, when guys miss meetings or when guys are late to a meal, if you do it enough times, you're going to go have to do an extra workout. You're going to get punished. That wasn't something that was happening last year. And it sounds silly to say that, but it really wasn't. The culture there was just a mess. And I think bringing some organization, some discipline and stability is something that A&M sorely needs. And I think it will raise the floor on this program. I don't know what the ceiling is, but I think the floor will come up because just those little things are not going to go overlooked as much anymore.
Sam, do you think that Mike Elko is the person that, more of the R.C. Slocum style personality? R.C., great coach, but he wasn't bombastic. Mike Sherman wasn't bombastic. They just couldn't quite get it together with him. But, when you've got Kevin Sumlin and Jimbo Fisher back-to-back, that feels to me that they're trying to be Alabama or they're trying to be LSU when that's not who they are.
Yeah, I think R.C. Slocum, I think, is a good comparison. I would actually even argue Elko's pretty good to deal with. But R.C., I would even say, is probably more charismatic than Elko. Elko's a really sharp guy, and he's a really nice guy. I like dealing with him. But I think Elko's trying everything he can to not say something that's going to make a headline. We've caught it in the press conferences too, where you've asked him a question and he's like, "You're not going to get me with that one." he's smart enough to sidestep the landmines, and I think that awareness is really important because guess what? Whether you like it or not, being a face of the program and voice of the program is a huge part of the job. It's a huge part of being the head coach, is the PR part of the politician part of the job. And I think Mike's goal is to be as under the radar as possible in that. Don't say anything that's going to piss anyone off. Don't say anything that's going to get the other team fired up. Let's just be as milquetoast as possible while answering the questions. And I think that approach is good. There are different, Kevin Sumlin I thought was good at that time because A&M, I think, needed a little jolt when they came into the SEC because everybody was thinking they were going to get their head beat in that first year, and of course they didn't. But then that ran its course, and they ended up making the change to Jimbo, and Jimbo was a big splash, but obviously, all had no cattle eventually at the end of it. So I think it is good to go back to that style of guys, like a defensive guy. Not going to be out there. He's not going to be in your recruiting videos. He's not going to be dancing like Brian Kelly. He's going to be there coaching ball, doing what he wants to do, and trying to get that team to win football games.
So, Sam, you mentioned being there the past couple of days. So you saw Texas A&M. I know there was a handful of other schools, Bama and Florida and, Arkansas and so on and so forth. Besides what you talked to us about, what's just kind of your takeaways, I guess, leaving SEC Media Days, whether that's Texas or A&M related or just conference-wide in general?
I think it's just going to be fascinating to see the pecking order of what this conference is going to be. Certainly, I think Georgia is the alpha dog, and that is, as long as Kirby Smart's there, that's going to be the foreseeable future because of the way they recruit. But then in Alabama, I think so far what I've seen from them recruiting-wise is encouraging. I think Kalen DeBoer is a really good X's and O's coach. And so if he can pair the talent with that, and keep the talent at a high level from a recruiting standpoint, I think that bodes really well for them. But then there's a lot of ambiguity after that. Where does LSU fit? Where does Texas fit? Where does A&M fit? Where does Oklahoma fit? This conference is used to being so top heavy with Georgia and Alabama and LSU to a certain extent. And now, because you've added Texas and Oklahoma, now it's going to be a deeper league than it was before, where there's not going to, I don't think there's going to be as huge a drop off from the top to the middle of the pack, so to speak. And so how does that play out in the playoff? What does that mean for the long term of the season? What does that mean for the coaches' jobs? Because as we all know, fans in this, especially in the schools in this conference, they're not very patient. You cannot be missing the playoffs in this new era. You can't be having an 8-4 season very often because they're going to end up getting you run out because these are all programs with championship pedigrees and championship expectations and championship resources. So not everybody can go 10-2 or 11-1. So that's what to me is going to be fascinating to watch is how does that pecking order fall in the 16-team conference? Who is after the big dogs? Who's going to be that third team, so to speak, that you look at as getting into the playoffs?
We discussed this a little bit with you yesterday, Sam Conn, theathletic.com, is that you could get, if you burp and lose a game you're not supposed to, or a game that you expect to win, and then your schedule can just lean on you, can it? To just lean on you. Next thing you know, even if it's a team that right now may not have high expectations, there are some bangers in there that are on the second level that can lean on you when they get hot, and you could find yourself struggling to get to 8-4. So,
yeah, because think about if you get beat up, by Georgia one week, what do you think? Jeff Lebby and Mississippi State's going to take it easy on you the next week? They still have really good talent, and you pair what he does schematically with that talent. That's going to be a fascinating thing to watch. The Ole Miss, obviously, that's another team. As I mentioned, all these teams in the top tier. Ole Miss is a team that I think a lot of people are pegging as a playoff contender because of what they did in the portal and how much talent they have on the roster. So, yeah, you look at I've just listed off of that top tier. I listed about 6-7 teams that we're talking about that are all teams that are going to expect to be playoff teams, and only probably 3 of them maximum are going to make it. And so, like you said, I think we're also going to have to adjust our expectations. I don't think it's not going to be possible for 3 teams to be 11-1. There's going to be some 10-2s. There's going to be some 9-3s, and fans are going to have to adjust and learn to live with that, because you're going to have a Power 5 non-conference game or Power 4 non-conference game, and then you're going to have this conference schedule that's deeper than it's ever been before. So you're going to have to get used to, for lack of a better comparison, an NFL-style deal where you're going to get in the playoff with some losses. And that's going to have to be okay with some schools, but it's going to be fascinating to see how people perceive that, because we're so used to, as a college football viewing public, just throwing the baby out with the bathwater when a team loses a game. If it was like, oh, when you lose a game or you lose a second game, the season's over. That's not the world we're living in anymore. A 12-team playoff, after 2 losses, you may still be in this thing, especially if you're in the SEC. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how people react to that as the season goes on.
Sam, one more thing on Sankey and the SEC. They have all the hardwares we've mentioned. There have been a few subtle comments from him about FSU. We know the story, including one earlier. Brett McMurphy had something about the fact that they're not going to slice up their pie into more pieces. Have you kind of felt a little bit of an edge from him just because he can when it comes to FSU?
I think so, and he knows he's in a powerful position. You know, he holds the cards because he is in the conference that everyone wants to be in. That nobody's looking to leave that conference. They have a great TV deal that they just signed, and there's no commissioner or central figure like that in this sport. So Sankey is one of, if not the most powerful person in the sport, one of the 2 most powerful people in the sport with Tony Petitti at the Big Ten. So when you're in that position, you can kind of let it hang a little bit. And I noticed he got a little chippy in day one, answering questions about FSU and ACC a bunch, but they can pull that lever if they want to, and FSU will gladly come, because we all know FSU has not been shy about how they feel about being in the ACC. But it's Sankey that holds the cards, and he showed that with the power move in 2021 when he got Texas and Oklahoma to come along, and he holds them now. So yeah, I think there is going to be a little bit of an edge and a little bit of throwing your weight around when he can, because he's in that position. So I'll be interested to see how it plays out. Knock on wood, I hope nothing happens this summer, because we've had realignment for the last 3 summers. And brother, I would like to get to kick off without another one of these.
God almighty. Yes, praise to you for saying that. There's no question. Thank you very much, Sam, for a couple of days in a row. Great to have you on the show, and hopefully get away from there and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you so much, guys. Y'all take care.
Sam Kahn, theathletic.com, saying what I think, even though